I'm going to be honest and say that the looter shooter genre feels like it's dying. Almost all of the games in the genre are suffering from low population, desperate attempts to keep their current player base around. Besides one particular game coming out very soon, there isn't really much to be hyped about in the future of the looter shooter genre. Anthem just got the news that it's shutting down in January of next year. Destiny 2 is trying to bounce back at the 10-year culmination and fall off. Outriders 2 has apparently been cancelled from People Can Fly. The Division 3 is rumoured to be worked on but has been no news for over a year. The Cube is apparently an MMO FPS RPG, but whether that's a looter shooter, we don't really know. Warframe is quite possibly the only game that seems to be holding players and has a general positive sentiment. But what are we doing here? Seems like in the last 2 years there has been a big downtrend for this genre, which is all the more reason why Borderlands 4 is such an important game this year. The hype, the excitement, the positive sentiment towards the game, for the most part, apart from the financial side of things, there's a genuine excitement around Borderlands 4, and the genre desperately needs a game like this. I don't just want Borderlands. You don't just want Borderlands. Looter shooter fans need Borderlands 4. Even as a casual fan of the franchise, the buzz towards a new looter shooter is their most important, because as most looter shooter fans will know, the hunger and ravenous nature to get that perfect roll, that perfect 1% extra on whatever gear that you have, is what keeps us playing. With Borderlands 4, it's a fresh start to do all of that again, and that's what gets us hyped. However, I don't think Borderlands 4 is truly addressing the problems that I believe we are facing with upcoming or current looter shooters on offer. The biggest factor that I can point to in the market is staleness and settled games. Currently, every single game that is still active, bar one exception in the looter shooter space, has been around for 5 years or more. Destiny 2 launched in 2017, but has obviously dated back to 2014. Warframe released in 2013 has had countless updates. The Division 2 was 2019. Even Borderlands 3 came out in 2019 as well. The first Descendant, which came out last year, is barely over a year old, and that's still having the same issues that all of the looter shooters face. Each of these games has found a pattern and an update cycle, a rhythm to content updates that generate buzz within their own self-contained communities. There is some crossover here and there, but generally it's a specific hype towards a specific game. This has led to a slow decline of population in all of the games because there's no new people getting into the looter shooter space, because it's hard to approach one, especially if it's been out for 5 years or so. There's no efficient jumping on point or good jumping on point for a majority of new players, and that can be really detrimental to the future of a game, especially when some of the new player experiences are really quite bad. Oftentimes you will need a veteran to help you through a lot of the game and get to grips and know what's good. That takes a real commitment, and also finding someone that is a veteran of the game. Can't help but feel like the looter shooter market has been tainted in some way. Without disregarding the success and general sentiment for Warframe, which I haven't touched myself, but I generally hear good things about it, many of the other established games have had massive issues that I feel have impacted developers getting into the space, new players trying out those games, and the general sentiment around the looter shooter genre being quite poor. Anthem has certainly been a catalyst for quite a bit of this, especially when it comes to its poor launch and then never really having the chance to recover with various updates to change the general sentiment of the game. After the stories were revealed about its development, it seems like the game was doomed from the start, and seeing it shut down is sad, but if it was really showing potential of people wanting to play it, then it would have probably had more people playing it over the last couple of years, and it just hasn't been the case, which is really unfortunate. Destiny has gone through various content cycles, but the most damaging to the game has been outside of the game itself with Bungie. Mass layoffs over the last 2 years have certainly not helped. Countless of bad press stories, such as the work culture, stealing art, and the general morale around the game and the studio itself, and this has generated a great level of distrust around Bungie. That distrust, combined with the 10-year culmination of the series, meaning that many players have left the franchise, is just another bad combo. Outriders had a lot of hype and was generally pretty good across the board for a lot of people. Over 3 million people played the game, but unfortunately that was not enough sales figures for Square Enix. Even with the follow-up expansion a year later, they were not profitable with the game whatsoever. Combined with that, Outriders had a real problem with endgame at launch, and a lot of the systems weren't fixed until the new update a year later, and by that point a load of people had moved on. And it was weird that this game wasn't live service because it had so much potential to be live service. The developers, though, didn't want to go down that route. Division 2 launched in 2019 and, according to Ubisoft, was their highest selling game in 2019 with a record number of sales. But similar to Outriders, it had problems with its main game. It also had problem with endgame, and even though it was getting regular content updates, the player base started to fall and fall. And there has been a couple of big expansions quite recently, but it's never really recovered. What seems to be a common through line with all of these games is that every new looter shooter that releases has the tagline, "Wait a year and it will be good." Can't tell you how many times I've revisited all of these titles later on down the road and they've been way better. But that just isn't good enough for anyone, even the people that stick around to see those changes. With the amount of games that release on a yearly basis and the amount of live service offerings that there are, if you release an incomplete product, especially a looter shooter, you are going to struggle. A possible solution to this is making another entry in the franchise, like a Division 3 or a Destiny 3, similar to what Borderlands is doing. It would be a huge risk to kind of stop what you are doing in your current cycle and potentially lose a little bit of money in the short term, but long term you could have huge profits if the next game you make is really good. But I don't really know how many developers are going to take that risk, which is why we've seen so many of them settle, apart from Borderlands. With the emergence of extraction shooters being the next gaming trend, maybe we've got a few studios that are working on loot-based games pivoting and making an extraction shooter because it's the next thing that people are wanting. The reason I mention this is because Arc Raiders has already done this. Originally it was supposed to be this PvE loot-based game, and then it swapped over to a PvPvE extraction shooter. After playing many hours of many different looter shooters, I think there are 4 key pillars that make a looter shooter successful, and if you nail all of them, then it sets the game up for a prosperous future. Number 1 is core gameplay. There needs to be a fun gameplay loop that the players fall in love with. The abilities, the builds, the RPG nature of some of them, the weapons then combined in, the loot that you use. On the whole, I think that every game has had something different and unique and has had this core gameplay down. Even Anthem, in its failings, had a really cool concept for its gameplay. Second is, of course, the loot. There needs to be something worth chasing. The loot needs to be exciting, game-changing at times, and reinforce the loop of playing. There also needs to be a balance between the chase and giving people the taste of the good stuff, and it's a hard thing to get right. Loot needs to be interesting at the end of the day, because if it becomes samey too quickly, then people aren't going to want to keep chasing it. And then it ties down to whether or not you're doing loot that is weapons or things that enhance your character, so that is something that could play into that loop as well. Third of these pillars, which most of these games get wrong, is the end game. It's one of the most important aspects because you can't have gameplay and loot without having something interesting to test yourself with, whether that's being really interesting encounter designs like you have with the raids in Destiny, or you have the difficulty options that get increased, or you have bosses to be able to bake. These things are important to test yourself and make that grind worth doing. This is the biggest killer of looter shooters for me. Get this wrong and people won't be hooked. They will find another game that will satisfy that itch really quickly. Fourth and final pillar is post-launch support. Being quick to make changes, listening to community feedback, and providing a good roadmap for the future is so important. It can be lost at times because you're spent so much time fixing other core issues with the game, and if you get those first 3 pillars right, then you can go straight into your post content support, balance changes, keeping the game fresh. If they get this right and everything comes together, the post-launch support will bang, because people will want more things. They'll be willing to pay for more things, and they'll play for longer. Oftentimes, developers will get one of these 4 pillars right, or even 2 of them, but they'll fail at the other ones. They'll get the core gameplay and the loot right, but there's no end game or there's no post-launch support. Every single game that I've mentioned has already had these issues in varying degrees. One of these pillars has kind of fallen down, no matter how much they've tried to fix them. And a couple of games that I haven't even mentioned did the opposite order of things. Avengers and Suicide Squad announced post-launch support of the game and all of these plans that they had, but they didn't get the core gameplay right. The loot was very uninteresting, and the core gameplay overall just didn't have that hook that many players wanted. There was still some established communities and people that gelled with it. If you're not going to have a big player base that's vying for that post-launch support, then it doesn't really matter. Obviously, these pillars that I've mentioned are my own personal points. Let me know if you have your own key things that make a looter shooter great for you and what keeps you playing. I'd love to know in the comments section. My final thoughts from today's video are this. The looter shooter genre needs an injection, something to be hopeful about. I can't stress the importance of Borderlands 4 releasing and being that hope. I have a feeling that it will be big and have a great launch. It's bold and ambitious and looks to be an improvement over the previous games. It is that hope. Looter shooter fans don't just want Borderlands 4, they kind of need it, and I kind of need it. However, the current franchises around Borderlands need to step up their game, because otherwise, unless someone else comes into the space, we're going to have some serious issues. Oftentimes, players are looking for that next Destiny or that next Warframe, which is why the comparisons always come up when something new releases. Hopefully a game can come along to reignite that competition. Maybe it is Borderlands 4, I don't really know. All I know is that I've spent countless hours playing this genre from Borderlands 1 through to Destiny, and it's one of my favorite genres across all of gaming, and it's sad to see where it is today. At one point, I felt like there were too many looters to play that I could even sink my time into. Let's hope that in the next few years we see a change in the genre, but as of right now, things aren't looking overly hot. Thank you very much for watching the video. Hopefully you have some thoughts that you can share about the looter shooter genre down in the comments section. And as always, I'm open to having those discussions. And make sure you hit the like button, subscribe if you enjoyed this content. And this has been It's Jimbo, and I'll see you guys next time.